There is a particular kind of sadness that comes with watching someone who once seemed untouchable by the ordinary rules of life gradually face the same fragile reality as the rest of us. Stevie Nicks has always seemed like a woman from another world, draped in chiffon and lace, spinning on darkened stages, her voice a low and haunting thing that seemed to come from somewhere beyond ordinary human experience. She was the Gold Dust Woman, the White Witch, the mysterious heart of one of the greatest rock bands the world has ever known. Now at 77, the reality of her life is far more complicated, far more tender, and in many ways far more heartbreaking than the image she so carefully and beautifully built. Born Stephanie Lynn Nicks on May 26, 1948. In Phoenix, Arizona, she grew up moving frequently across the American Southwest and West Coast as her father's career demanded. From a young age, she was drawn to music, shaped by a grandfather who loved country songs and a mother who fed her imagination with fairy tales and mysticism. Those two early influences, music and magic, would become the twin pillars of everything she later built. When she met Lindsey Buckingham as a teenager in California, something clicked that would change the course of music history. Together, they recorded an album, struggled for years in obscurity, and then, in 1975, were invited to join Fleetwood Mac. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. The band's album Rumors became one of the best-selling records of all time, and Stevie Nicks became a superstar while simultaneously nursing a broken heart. Since she and Buckingham had split just as the band was soaring to its greatest heights. The cruel irony of Stevie Nicks' story is that the very world which gave her everything also came close to taking everything away. The rock and roll life of the 1970s was fueled by excess, and Nicks descended deeply into cocaine addiction during the height of Fleetwood Mac's success. She spent enormous sums feeding that habit. She wore it visibly, and it damaged her nose and her health in ways she has spoken about openly and painfully in the decades since. In 1986, she checked herself into the Betty Ford Center and emerged believing she had turned a corner. But the road back was more treacherous than she could have imagined. A psychiatrist she consulted afterward prescribed her a powerful sedative called clonopin, gradually increasing the dose until she was taking a staggering number of pills each day. What followed were 8 years she has described as the theft of her own life. Her weight climbed dramatically, her hair thinned, her creativity vanished. She has said the light went out in her eyes. She has said she might have met someone, might have had a child, might have made more great records during those years. Instead, she was largely lost. The 47-day detox she eventually underwent to free herself from that drug was, by her own account, more brutal than anything cocaine had done. She survived it. That is the thing about Stevie Nicks. She keeps surviving. But survival always carries a cost, and the cost of her particular journey is written quietly in the shape of her personal life. She never married. She has no children. She has spoken about this with great honesty and without excessive self-pity. But there is something undeniably melancholy in her reflections. She has said she made a deliberate choice to follow her creative instincts, that anyone who entered her life would always come second to her music and her work. She has described those 8 clonopin years as the time when the possibility of a family slipped away for good. She has said she will go to her grave, angry at the doctor who prescribed that drug, not because of what it did to her career, but because of what it stole from her as a woman, who might have wanted more than stages and spotlights. Then came the loss that may have hurt her most deeply of all. Christine McVie, her best friend since 1975, the woman she called her big sister and her anchor, died in November 2022 after a stroke and cancer. Nicks found out her friend was seriously ill only days before she passed away. She had wanted desperately to fly to London to be by her side, but the family asked her to stay home. She did not get to say goodbye. She did not get to hold her hand. For someone who had shared stages, dressing rooms, tour buses, heartbreaks, and decades of music with another person, to lose her in that way, suddenly, at a distance, without a final conversation, was a wound that Nicks has spoken about in interviews with unmistakable rawness. The grief has not fully left her. It shows in the way she talks about Christine, in the way she still speaks of her in the present tense of the heart rather than the past tense of loss. In January 2025, the California wildfires forced her to evacuate her home in the Pacific Palisades. She found herself sitting in a hotel room for months, watching from a distance as entire neighborhoods burned. Out of that displacement and grief came something remarkable. She began writing again. She announced plans for a new album, something she had not released in nearly 15 years, calling it her Ghost Record, a collection of songs that arrived unexpectedly from the ashes of loss and dislocation. It was the most Stevie Nicks response imaginable to tragedy. Make something beautiful from the wreckage. She fractured her shoulder in summer 2025 and was forced to postpone the first leg of her North American solo tour. At 77, A shoulder fracture is not a trivial thing. Recovery takes time and patience, and the body does not cooperate the way it once did. She leaned into music to heal, listening to younger artists for hours, letting their energy carry her through the discomfort. She returned to the stage in October and continued performing through the end of the year, with concert reviews that described her as joyful and fully present, and she has 2026 tour dates already on the books. The reality of Stevie Nicks at 77 is not a simple or comfortable story. She is alone, in the way that a person who chose her art over everything else is alone. She has lost her closest friend. She has survived addiction twice, in two very different forms. She has watched her home threatened by fire and her body slowed by injury. She carries the weight of a life that burned very bright and very hot for a very long time. But she is still standing. She is still writing. She is still on tour. She is still, impossibly and beautifully, Stevie Nicks. And somehow, that is both the saddest and the most extraordinary thing